The stars above Archaean sparkled like frozen coals, hanging in a sky torn by green lightning. The alien castle rose like bone carved from a forgotten god, its towers screaming with the echo of storms. And beneath those towers, where no one cared to look, a human janitor scrubbed the endless marble floors, invisible in a world that had long ignored his kind. But that night, the Queen of Threxion returned without warning, her shadows spilling across the rooms of judgment. And when her eyes fell upon the janitor, she froze, because what he was doing would shatter everything the galaxy believed. Before we start, subscribe now so you don't miss more incredible stories like this one. The Hall of Convergence stretched wider than any cathedral on Earth. A room of glassy black stone lit by rivers of melted light that ran across the ceiling. The sound was endless. 1,000 alien voices hissing, clicking, chanting. Delegates from across 9 systems sat in tiered crescents, their jeweled robes glimmering like poisonous scales. And somewhere below them, at the very edge of sight, a single human man knelt with a brush and a bucket of gray water. Elias Ward, janitor of the Intergalactic Tribunal. His hands were raw, the chemicals biting into his skin, but he worked in silence. His uniform, a faded navy jumpsuit, hung loose on his shoulders. The aliens did not look at him. To them he was the dust, the shadow, the necessary ghost who swept away their footprints before the next show. The Threxian guards walked past him, armor spiked with black stone. They laughed in their throat songs when their boots splattered dirty water across his knees. Elias did not flinch. High above, Magistrate Surok delivered another order. His voice shook the room like thunder. "Humanity has no seat here," he announced, his mouth part snapping as the crowd hissed approval. "They are workers. They are leftovers of a failed world." The words struck harder than any boot. Delegates leaned back in satisfaction, tails and antennas swaying in smug rhythm. Elias kept scrubbing, his reflection blurred in the marble floor. Pale face, lined eyes, brown hair breathing alien air that burned human lungs. He had once been something more, though none here knew. To them, he was simply the janitor who never spoke. A group of young Vayari nobles passed, their skin glowing with patterns that shifted like rivers of stars. They pointed at him, laughter dripping like poison. "Look, the floor crawler," one sneered. "Does he even understand our language?" Another chuckled. Their voices rose in mockery, carrying across the room. Some delegates chuckled, others sneered openly. Elias did not lift his head. He drew the brush in slow, steady movements, polishing the stone until it shone like black ice. And then she entered. The doors split apart with a crack of thunder. A silence rolled across the room as if the oxygen had been sucked from the air. The banners trembled. The melted rivers in the ceiling froze mid-glow. The alien queen had returned, tall as storm clouds. Her shell gleamed with 100 shifting colors like oil spilled across night. Her crown of living crystal pulsed with a rhythm older than suns. Her eyes, twin voids ringed with purple fire, swept the hall. Delegates gasped, some bowing down, others cowering. No one had expected her return. Rumor said she had vanished to the outer rift, swallowed by black holes. She walked with silence sharper than any blade, and when her eyes fell upon the floor, they stopped. Elias Ward, the human janitor, was not watching her. He was on his knees, tracing something invisible into the marble as he scrubbed. Lines, symbols, patterns no alien present recognized. His lips moved faintly, whispering in a language thought dead. The queen froze, her breath caught in the hollow of her chest, for she knew those shapes. She had seen them only once before, carved into the dying ruins of a world destroyed by war. Gasps rippled through the room. The crowd leaned forward, eager to mock, to jeer, but the queen did not speak. Her silence cut deeper than any laughter. And while the hall laughed, the outsider's eyes shimmered faintly, as if holding a truth older than the stars. The room stirred like a nest of angry wasps. Whispers darted between species, tongues clicking, tails lashing. No one understood why the alien queen had stopped, why her gaze lingered on the human janitor who should have been invisible. At the highest level of the tribunal, Magistrate Surok straightened, his mouth parts twitching in irritation. His black and gold robes shimmered, woven with the symbol of galaxies conquered. He hated silence unless it belonged to him. "Enough," he hissed, voice echoing through the pillars. His many-sided eyes flicked to Elias. "The floor scraper dirties our vision. Remove him." 2 guards stepped forward, blades humming. But before they could move down, the Queen raised her hand. The crystal crown above her forehead pulsed once, and all movement in the room froze. Even the melted light in the ceiling stuttered. "Leave him," she said, her voice both whisper and storm. The crowd exploded in chaos. Some wailed, others hissed in protest. A janitor protected by the Queen. It was unthinkable. Magistrate Surok's mouthparts clicked in fury. "My Queen, this is beneath you. Why regard a human worm?" The Queen did not answer him. Her eyes remained fixed on the marble floor where Elias knelt. Elias himself had not lifted his head. His brush still drew slow movements. He did not seem to notice the galaxy trembling around him. Surok rose. He had ruled in her absence, his pride swollen with power. He could not allow this shadow of a man to overshadow him. His voice boomed like iron striking iron. "Then let the worm prove his worth." The room went still. Surok spread his arms, spines along his back unfolding like spears. "If the Queen insists he remain, let him show us what use he holds. Let the human face a trial." The crowd roared in cruel delight. Trials meant humiliation. Trials meant show. The Queen's eyes narrowed. Yet she said nothing. The guards seized Elias by the arms and dragged him to the center circle. His bucket spilled, dirty water streaking across the black stone floor. The laughter rose higher. They pushed him beneath the tribunal's eye, a huge orb of living glass that hung above the room. It pulsed with neural light, able to send images into the minds of all who watched. Once it had judged war criminals. Now it would expose the weakness of a janitor. "You see, my Queen," Surok declared, bowing mockingly. "The human will fail before all, and your curiosity will end." The eye flared. From its heart unfolded a challenge, a puzzle of shifting shapes, glowing pieces weaving into impossible patterns. It was an ancient test of thinking, a game used to break prisoners until their minds dissolved. The crowd leaned forward, eager for blood, though this would spill none. Failure here meant ridicule, collapse, madness. Surok smiled with teeth sharp as black glass. "Solve this, floor scraper, or show the galaxy that humanity remains dust." The eye's light poured down upon Elias. He blinked, momentarily blinded. His palms still smelled of cleaner and stone. The laughter pressed on him like a storm, and still he did not speak. He simply looked at the shapes. The pieces twisted, locked together, dissolved. To the aliens it was chaos. To Elias, the lines whispered in silence, the same patterns he had been tracing into the marble floor moments before. Symbols no one else remembered. Gasps erupted as he lifted his hand. His fingers hovered in the air, moving with quiet certainty. Slowly, carefully, he guided the glowing pieces into alignment. The jeers stopped. The patterns tightened, spiraling into an order unseen for centuries. Colors bled into one another, forming star patterns only humans once mapped. Surok's smile thinned. He leaned forward, claws digging into his throne. The Queen's eyes never left Elias. She alone knew what those star patterns meant. A hush fell as the final piece slid into place. The eye pulsed once, hard enough to rattle the bones of the room. The puzzle was solved. Silence. Then, disbelieving laughter burst from the crowd. "Impossible, a trick. He is a janitor." Surok slammed a claw against the circle, snarling. "He cannot know. Humans are unable to do such thinking." But the eye did not lie. It bathed Elias in a column of pale light, recognition written in every flicker. For the first time, Elias looked up. His gaze swept the hall, not defiant, not proud, only calm, like a tide that could not be stopped. The hall shivered. No one believed he would even try. But the silence that followed spread across the room like a storm. The tribunal eye dimmed to a watchful glow, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Elias stood beneath its glass weight, the mop water drying in quiet star patterns at his boots. He did not show off. He did not bow. He merely looked at the marble, at the thin, invisible lines his brush had pulled from memory. A junior scribe, small and blue-veined, trembled at the foot of the eastern bench. Lear of the Veyari, barely past training, had spent nights sneaking into forbidden libraries to read names no one spoke anymore. He pushed through a group of sneering nobles. Voice shaking. It looks like Meridian writing," said Lear. Laughter pealed at once, as if a gong had been struck. "The floor crawler doodles," said a Threxian guard. "Let the child sit," said a Palaran senator. The queen did not move. If she breathed, it was the breath of distant glaciers. Her eyes, ringed in purple fire, studied the drying swirls at Elias's feet. Surak snapped his clawed fingers, calling up a hollow spindle that opened like a metal flower. Within its petals unfolded a second trial, a waterfall of languages layering over one another. Pieces of law and song, treaty and curse, an interlocking script that had broken scholars. "Read this." "Human," said Surak. The crowd leaned forward, teeth bared. "Lenses recording." "Or admit that your first success was luck," said Surak. Elias lifted his hands with a custodian's simple motion. He did not reach for the hovering script. Instead, he wiped his palms on the thighs of his jumpsuit and stepped back to his bucket, as if to get a tool. He pulled out a thin, warped squeegee, its edge chipped from years of scraping grime out of grooves, and held it against the air as though angling a tool to a star. He rotated it a few degrees. The hollow script bent. Lines that had been clotted and unreadable snapped into alignment like iron pieces in a magnetic field. The room gasped. "Meridian indexing," said Lear. "A little louder now." "You align the writing planes to their burial angles." Surak's jaw tightened. "Tricks," said Surak. Elias traced with the squeegee and read, not aloud, but with a murmured rhythm that made the eye answer him in matching light. The 9th agreement, cancelled by its own excess. The 12th bound to sunken oaths. The 13th cancelled, said Elias. Murmurs curled through the benches like smoke. The 13th agreement was myth, a rumor of a treaty signed with hands already stained by war. The record had been lost during the Queen's absence. It had proven the tribunal served law, not hunger. If it existed, then Surak's orders, his cruelties, were built on sand. The Queen's crown pulsed once, brief as a heartbeat. "Show us the proof," said the Queen. Elias set the squeegee down. He reached for his mop and wrung it over the black stone in slow circles. Water pulled and reflected the hollow light into the ceiling. Curves upon curves. He drew with the soaked threads in a patient spiral, his shoulders the beat of a remembered song. The writing planes shifted again, aligning with the water's ragged moon. A signature appeared in pale gold. 3 slashed lines, one broken, one whole, one crossed with a meteor tail. Lear gasped and clapped a hand over his mouth. Even the gesture earned him sneers. "That is the seal of the Meridian Custodians," said Lear. "The Custodians are a bedtime tale," said a senator of ash-pink scale. "They were record keepers." "Not kings," said a leader with coral tusks. "Ghosts keep no laws," said a guard. Elias did not argue. He pressed the squeegee lightly to the symbol seal, and the tribunal eye released a low sound, something between a note and a promise. Images bled into the dome above, a ring of humans, unarmed, standing among giants. A table of stone, a crown offered and refused. Surak rose halfway from his throne, spines bristling. "Enough of tricks and puddles," said Surak. "The human will confess how he stole these writings." Elias lowered the squeegee and turned his face slightly, just enough for the light to catch the old scar above his forehead. His eyes did not harden. They deepened like a coastline under dusk. "I stole nothing," said Elias. "I clean what the galaxy forgets." Surak lunged, claws stabbing toward the human's chest, but the Queen's voice struck first. "Clean as flint. Stand down," said the Queen. The word traveled like a ribbon of ice. The guards froze mid-breath. The eye brightened as if welcoming a long-absent signal, and just when everyone thought they would break, something was revealed that no one expected. From the dome spilled a hush of stars. They did not belong to any chart the nobles used. No trade lanes, no conquest routes. They were arranged in strange arcs. A quiet pattern. The eye showed a memory with the truth of sorrow. A small ship drifting at the edge of the outer rift. A human woman at its controls, sleepless, fierce. An alien crown laid carefully beside her hands. Across the benches, suspicion became unease. Surak's spines lowered a bit, his pupils thinning. "Lies," said Surak. Elias did not answer him. He lifted the mop handle and with steady pressure tapped 3 times against the marble. The eye answered. The image expanded to show an inscription carved inside the crown. 3 slashed lines. One broken, one whole, one crossed with a meteor tail. It was the same seal that shimmered now in water and light at his feet. She was Meridian, said Lear in a voice that shook. Whoever she was, the Queen's eyes had turned very far inward, as if she were looking through the room and her own ribcage to something buried beneath both. Keep it, she had once been told by a dying ally. Hide it until the galaxy can be taught to remember, said the dying ally. Memory ran hot along cold bone. The Queen raised her head. Where did you learn to align the planes? Said the Queen. From floors that never forget, said Elias. The hall shifted. The noble's smirks wavered. Not yet falling, not yet gone. Even the ones who hated the Queen felt the room tilt. A janitor aligning ancient law with a mop and a squeegee mocked their entire structure. I demand the taking of these images and the arrest of the human for relic manipulation, said Surak. If he is Meridian. Your charge is treason, said a diplomat in a thin, dangerous calm. Surak turned, unbelieving. You dare, said Surak. The tribunal serves agreements, not your shadow, said the diplomat. The air thickened. Something in the eye warmed from within, as if a pilot light long starved of fuel had found breath. Symbols flared gently across the dome. Not mercy, not revenge. Index entries. Locations of sealed records. Chains of proof. Elias lifted his hands, palms open, then pressed them together once as though closing a book. The eye locked onto his gesture like a falcon to a held glove. Accepting the command without question. In the benches, gasps. Then silence. Command-level access did not recognize janitors. Surak half rose again, then stopped. It wasn't fear. Not yet. It was doubt. The rust that comes before collapse. And in that breath, the room realized what flickered in the janitor's patience wasn't only understanding. It was inheritance. It wasn't just knowledge. It was legacy. And suddenly, silence fell across the crowd. The eye unfolded a final picture, not of stars, but of a room smaller than this one and far more sacred. A vault of stone in which all voices sounded like the first word and the last. There, a young human signed, with ink that would not run, beside an alien queen whose shell had not yet cracked with rule. Witnesses stood, Vayari with comet light in their veins, Threxians with war plates laid aside. The human signature read, My Reward. Ward, said a senator, as if meeting a ghost at breakfast. Ward, said three others in tones that twisted from mockery to awe, mid-syllable. Surak's voice tried to shrug it off, but it caught on its own pride. Names are wind, said Surak. This proves nothing of the worm. Elias touched his scar again, absent, as if it were a memory's latch. I never asked to prove anything, said Elias. I asked for the floor to be clean. Who was my reward to you? Said the Queen. The mop handle steadied between his hands. His jaw worked once before he answered, as if the words had to be lifted from a place that did not like to be disturbed. She taught me to bundle oaths into chores, said Elias. She taught me to scrub until the truth shows. She taught me to keep a crown where no one of importance would ever think to look. She taught me to keep my name out of the mouths of those who would eat it. Your mother, said Lear, tears brightening his glowing skin. Surak barked a laugh that didn't land properly. Every worm claims kinship with history when cornered, said Surak. The Queen descended 2 steps, the living crystal of her crown whispering. It was not anger that filled her face. It was recognition, one sorrow finding another in a crowded room. You kept faith while the galaxy fed itself on forgetting, said the Queen. Surak's spines rose again, sudden as thrown knives. If he is a custodian, he must show the binding right. Without it, this is theater, said Surak. Elias knelt, not to beg. To begin, he slid the squeegee along the seam where 2 stones met, pulling from that tight mouth a thin thread of dust the color of moon ash. With his pointer finger, he drew the thread into a ring, and inside the ring traced 3 slashed lines, one broken, one whole, one crossed by a meteor tail. He set the mop across the symbol, not as a weapon, but as a bridge. Binding right of Meridian, said Lear, barely breathing. The eye brightened until the room's shadows fled. Threads of light stitched from the symbol to the dome, from the dome to the Queen's crown, from the crown to the old vault where Myra Ward's ink had not yet dried in memory. Seals clicked. Locks opened like eyes. Elias did not look proud. He looked tired, with the clarity of someone who has finally put a heavy thing down. Surak stepped forward to shout the room back to his favor. He did not get the chance, the Queen spoke, and her voice was a blade drawn once in a lifetime. When drawing it meant you would live differently afterward. My reward, said the Queen. The name rang in the eye, and in the marble, and in the bones of those who had laughed at mops and squeegees. It rang like a key striking the last lock. Archives obeyed. Oaths woke. The tribunal's own law braided itself back into shape, and the braid did not include Surok's shadow. But the final blow came not from words. It came from a name the galaxy had long forgotten. The guards lowered their blades, not because they were commanded, but because the weight of the room had changed. Surok's throne seemed smaller by 2 sizes, his robes less gold and more dull. He opened his mouth parts to deny, then found nothing to stand on. The eye had bled him of more than show. It had bled him of pretense. The Queen turned, and the living crystal of her crown bowed toward Elias, as if acknowledging a peer whose hands were raw and holy. The tribunal recognizes the Meridian custodian, said the Queen. Let the sealed agreements be restored. Elias lifted the mop and wrung the last of its water back into the bucket. He set both tools against the platform, neat and squared, the way he left rooms at the end of shift. He looked up at the terraces upon terraces of faces, scales and feathers and skin. So many eyes he had learned to avoid. Keep the eye clean, he said softly, as if giving the first instruction on the first day of a job no one else knew they needed. Laws rot fast in dirty light. Surok tried to laugh again, but nothing came except a dry rattle. His spines drooped. Tragic little flags. A worm wagging a mop does not unmake a magistrate, said Surok. Mud does not become a crown because it sits high, said Elias. The hall did not cheer. That would have reduced the moment to a match won in a stadium. They stood very still and watched the idea of themselves shed. It happened quietly, and then all at once. The way dawn's first line appears on a black sea and then is everywhere. Elias did not take a victory lap. He lifted the bucket, which was heavy with the dirt of 1,000 footsteps, and stepped from the platform the way he had stepped onto it. Worker-like, shoulders squared against nothing but weight and time. At the doorway of the Hall of Convergence, he did something small and huge. He set the squeegee on the stone bench where petitioners rested their fear and folded beside it a square of cloth he had saved from his first day on this floor. It was stained with the color of wrong scrubbed away and the color of right revealed. For whoever cleans after me, said Elias. Surok's shadow, great and showy, no longer reached the door. He was reduced to the size of his own intentions. The crowd parted for the janitor the way one parts for weather. A respect that has nothing to do with rank and everything to do with recognition. And as he walked away, no one dared laugh again, for they finally understood what they had witnessed. In the wake of the trial, changes moved like tectonic plates. Slow to those who wanted fireworks. Swift to those listening with their shoes off on the ground. The tribunal's walls, once polished to reflect only power, began to carry new reflections. The eye's computer programs were rebuilt with meridian indexing at their center. Laws first, appetite last. Requests once dismissed on accent alone were heard in full sentences. On Threxian, schools revised their lessons. An entire class learned the history of the custodians and the oaths that ran under the great roads like veins. In the markets of Vayari, children played at setting mop handles across chalk symbols, arguing happily about star angles instead of whose elders had the deadlier song. And messenger from the Polaran cluster requested a copy of the Meridian Rites, and after an unusual pause, asked if a human might be assigned to teach it. The Queen gathered a council, not of victors but of keepers, record keepers, cleaners, cooks who knew which way a door groans when it is asked to do more than it was built for. She stood with them bareheaded, crown light sleeping on the table like an artifact among other tools. We do not need a new era, said the Queen. We need our first honest one. Elias did not sit at the head of any table. He returned each dawn to the Hall of Convergence and did his work with the quiet pride of a craftsman who prefers results to applause. Delegates arrived earlier than they used to, walking slower, noticing the water patterns drying on the black stone like frost blown by a wise wind. Some greeted him, some asked questions, more listened. Lear of the Vayari, no longer a trainee, carried a stack of tablets and learned to check them against the floor's reflections. He visited the lower hallways where the air breathed and asked the maintenance crews how they mapped the hum of machinery into intuition. He wrote their names down in the library, not as support, but as foundation. Laws hold when their smallest parts are honored, said Lear. The rest is theater. As for Surak, he remained present the way a scar remains. Teaching, humbling. He was not banished. Banishment would have been too clean for a culture learning to wash with care. He was assigned to the vault's cold rooms at the Queen's suggestion, where one learns the temperature of memory. There he listed minor records and sometimes paused too long over a symbol until a tear bled out along the ridge where pride had once sat. Punishment was not the point. Learning was, on a blue morning, when storms laid green seams across the sky, a messenger found Elias on the eastern steps and held out a small, battered box sealed with resin. Inside lay a circle of metal, plain, heavy, and a folded scrap of paper. The circle was a meridian clasp. The paper was a note in a handwriting he knew as well as his own heartbeat. "Keep only if you promise to keep nothing," said the note. Signed Myra. He closed the box and did not put the clasp on. He slid it beneath the bench where petitioners rested their fear and rose. The eye, faithful, newly honest, brightened as he crossed into the hall. There were still spills each day, sharp arguments, ancient hatreds that did not dissolve because a crown had once bowed to a mop. But in the wet shine of the floor one could read a different future, not as prophecy but as practice, a repetition of small exact acts that make a place ready for truth. At twilight the Queen sometimes stood at the balcony and watched the janitor finish his shift. When he laid the last corner clean, the melted ceiling seemed to slow its river of light in recognition. She would not call this redemption. Redemption centers the sinner when the story belongs to those who kept faith. She would call it the return of a duty that had wandered off for a very long time and at last found its way home. Elias would hang the mop in its holder, check the edge of the squeegee with a thumb, and walk out under the green-braided sky. Delegates nodded, sometimes bowed. Children tugged their guardian's sleeves and whispered the custodian's marks with the seriousness of a good-night prayer. In one of the outer districts, where the city's bone towers faded into dune and salt, a school of mixed species painted the 3 slashed lines on a courtyard wall. One broken, one whole, one crossed by a meteor tail. They practiced aligning their chalk scripts to the angle of the sun until sunset's first red coin found the right angle, and the wall blazed briefly, laughing in light. A human taught them. An alien taught them. The wall taught them. The Queen, returning from a hearing, passed the bench at the hall's doorway. The old cloth lay there, folded square as a promise. She touched it and felt a pulse of simple gratitude travel her arm like warmth. Behind her the eye kept its watch with no hunger but light. The galaxy did not become gentle. It became truer. And truth, once allowed to breathe, has a way of shaping gentleness not from fear but from respect. The kind that bows to a mop and a crown in the same breath because it recognizes what both are meant to keep. In a universe built on pride, sometimes a single act of dignity is enough to shift the stars themselves.